Now, just a little warning before we begin, there will be some major spoilers in this video for the 14th episode of Season 3 of The Bad Batch, so if you haven't seen it yet and you don't want anything ruined, it is a really good time to click away. Alright, so it's kind of hard to believe this was the second to last episode of The Bad Batch ever. Not only because the show really seems to have figured a lot out on the creation side of things and really sort of hit its stride this season, but also because it feels like there's a lot to try and cover and wrap up in one final episode, more than it's going to be able to do, even if it does end up being an extra long episode, which I heard from a leak of sorts will not be the case, though that very much could be and hopefully will be wrong. We'll have to wait and see. Either way, like I said, it just feels like there's a lot to cover. Like it's going to be very, very hard to sort of put a bow on this thing and for it to feel done when those final credits start to roll. And even if this will end in a way to set up whatever show will come next, assuming there is another animated show on the way, which I'd be very surprised if there isn't, I'm sticking by my theory that we will be getting an animated show with Ventress in it. Otherwise, that episode they brought her back in feels so out of place and strange. And keep in mind, there was an episode or an arc of The Bad Batch in Season 7 of the Clone Wars, which kind of set up this show. Anyway, even if it ends in a way that begins to set up whatever is next, you still want to give us some solid resolutions here, right? You still want to finish the show rather than just have it feel like it is ending to make way for what is next. And though yes, I will give them, the creators, the benefit of the doubt here. They do deserve it. Again, it's been a great season and I do have confidence they will stick the landing. But you do still have to wonder exactly how they're going to do that, how they're going to finish this off in a truly satisfying way when there are so many threads left to tie up, not the least of which is the sort of fate of the clones on the whole. I really thought going into this season that it'd be in large part about the plight of the clones, or the clone army I should say, that it'd focus a bit on some bigger picture stuff for them or with them. Especially after everything we saw last season with Chuchi and the Senate in that really good 2-episode arc. It felt like, yeah, we were going to cover a lot with the clones in that, thanks to some other episodes as well. Like there was this clone rebellion of sorts brewing or being set up. But nothing's really come of any of that this season, and I do wonder if maybe the original idea was to go 4 or maybe even more seasons and to cover some of that in more detail, some of the clone big picture stuff. But instead they decided to wrap it up in 3 seasons and to just focus almost entirely on the Bad Batch, which, yeah, is what the show is named after. Along with this, as I have been talking about the last few weeks, I know, but I do also again have to wonder why these last few episodes have been so short, to the point where, yeah, it kind of feels like we're sort of inching towards the finish line and maybe not holding the tension as well as they could have had things been structured a bit differently in terms of episode length and how many there are. And mind you, this isn't a huge complaint or anything. It's more of an observation of a creative decision that they've made that I'd love to ask them about. Again, given this is Disney Plus and you don't have to beholden yourself to runtime rules. So I'm just curious if it's truly a creative decision or if they have to follow certain rules laid down by Disney and Lucasfilm, or one or both, about episode length and number of episodes. Does Disney want this to be 15 episodes and the story they wanted to tell was only maybe 13 episodes of content, so it got stretched out? Is that maybe what happened here? But anyway, let's not worry too much about that. It's fine in the grand scheme of things, and let's talk a little bit about the episode itself finally. And I say a little bit because, again, not a ton really happens, which isn't to say it wasn't another good and enjoyable episode, but it was more about these curious little moments or things seen that seem like they may, or almost certainly will, set something up for the finale, more so than anything that, again, really kind of happens in the episode. Not that nothing happens, or it's not important, but it just feels like it was more about these little things that are alluding to what comes next, if that makes sense. Or as I'll try to explain, I guess. I'm basically just going to cover a few of these moments, then do any sort of real summary here of the full episode. Like, for example, once again seeing Crosshair's hand shake when talking about how he broke out of Tantus once before, and how that ultimately will come into play, because you know it will. You know he's going to have to make a shot of some kind in the finale next week, and his hand will start to shake. And maybe that meditating he learned from Omega several episodes back, that she learned from Gunji, will be what saves him in a way. That in this really, really, really roundabout way, he'll be saved by a Jedi after starting his journey out in this series trying to kill a Jedi or a Padawan, because he was just following orders. And speaking of that, of just following orders, another curious moment with Crosshair was his conversation with Rampart, where he, Crosshair, says that they were both betrayed by the Empire, but that now he has changed. And it ends with Rampart saying that you haven't changed, that you're like me, that you are loyal to no one but yourself. And then after Crosshair walks away, it kind of wraps up with Rampart over some rather ominous music saying, "Sure you have."
I've changed. Sure you have.
And this is interesting because unless it's somehow alluding to a Crosshair betrayal, which seems kind of ridiculous at this point and would make no sense after everything we've seen him go through, or it's trying to tease it for reasons, or it's just Rampart being wrong about Crosshair, I suppose. It could be that simple. Him, Rampart, not understanding what loyalty is. Either way, it almost feels like the show sort of spoon-feeding us something that's been really obvious in order to make sure some sort of perhaps sacrifice next week out of him, out of Crosshair, really kind of sticks and has that big impact. Like it's the show saying to us, the audience, that in case you hadn't noticed, Crosshair used to be this really selfish guy and now he isn't, and he'll have a chance to be selfish again and to just save himself, which has been his nature. But he won't take it, and he will instead maybe give his life. He'll make the ultimate selfless sacrifice for his brothers, or for Omega, or for all of them. Either that, or it was maybe just their way of letting us know Rampart will have no qualms about betraying them should he be captured, which of course he ultimately is after their little romp through the jungle. But the thing is, we know that, right? We know Rampart has zero loyalty to the Bad Batch and is going to save his own skin if he can. He'll give the Empire whatever information he can about them if it helps him. Or even if it doesn't help him, he might do it just to spite them because he can. I don't know, probably reading too much into a scene that means nothing, but the way it's presented seems to imply it wants us to question Crosshair or his loyalty, or that, yeah, it was just meant to reiterate some things to us. Not that they're trying to make us question Crosshair so much, as they're trying to kind of summarize his journey in 10 seconds or less, for those in the back who maybe haven't been paying too much attention. And so they will understand when he gives his life in the finale, again for Omega and or his brothers, why he's doing it. I don't know. And speaking of characters that I think will die next week, Ekko was, dare I say, almost sort of featured again in this episode, him and his skill set. I mean, as a lot of you will no doubt recall, he is or was an ARC trooper. And it was nice to finally see him using again his sort of full skill set and getting an episode to really kind of shine, after being forgotten or left in the background like the whole series, and before what just might end up being his personal finale, I think. I fear there's a good chance Ekko never makes it out of Mount Tantus and dies in the finale, but maybe I'll be wrong. Either way, Ekko, wearing a stormtrooper disguise, manages to avoid detection, and eventually he encounters Emery. Though before this, speaking of good or fun moments, I did like taking the hand from the droid, and even his cheesy line about thanks for the hand. Thought that was pretty good. But anyway, he encounters Emery, and kind of going along with that conversation between Rampart and Crosshair, she tells him, in regards to everything she's done for the Empire, that she was just doing her job, that she's been following orders, essentially. And he, Ekko, says, "Where have I heard that before?" Which again, really good, nice little moment. Along with this, we learn that Omega, no surprise, has told them about each other, that Omega told Emery about her brothers and that they would come for her, and has told Ekko and the others about Emery, and that he, Ekko, wants to believe that Omega wasn't wrong about her and that there is some good in her. Emery then tells him that Omega is in the vault with the other children and that he'll need her help to save them all. Which leads me to believe that despite, yes, Hemlock being the one that physically escorted or put Omega in the vault a couple episodes back, that it still could have been Emery's decision to do that. I had some pushback in the comments of last week's video against my thought or kind of theory that Emery may want them all together, all the kids together, in order to see them all be saved, knowing that the Bad Batch would come for them or come for Omega and then find the other kids and take them as well. And so now it seems like that very much could be the case to some degree, that she wanted them, again, all together, or is okay with them at the very least being together in order for them all to be rescued by the Bad Batch. And introducing Omega to the other kids was the only way to make sure that happened. Or that, again, she was okay with Hemlock putting them together. Remember how she defended the decision of Omega being in there to the other doctor last week. Either way, any intent behind it or not on Emery's part, I think no surprise that the other kids will almost certainly be rescued with Omega next week, which could begin to, more theory or speculation time here, could be something that sets up the next show about the Path, how perhaps Ventress, Omega, maybe even Quinlan Voss and a survivor of the rest of the Bad Batch, and or others will try to save Force-sensitive kids across the galaxy. Now that might sound a little generic at face value, but I'm sure there'd be a lot more to it than that. Might even be where we get more big picture clone stuff, who knows. The other big thing of note here, pun intended, is that while Omega was out exploring, she came across the Zillow Beast, and I think we can safely assume she's going to try and release the thing to cause some chaos and destruction so that her brothers can rescue them and to maybe even just destroy Tantus, hopefully after all the clones she cares about are out of it. And I was glad to see the Zillow Beast return because I don't want that to be kind of this dropped plot thread or plot story thread, which it kind of felt like in the Clone Wars, then it came back in the Bad Batch last season. So it's nice to see that it might actually kind of have a resolution, if you will. And all of those seem to be most of, I may be forgetting something, I feel like I am, but those are most of the really key or big moments that have set up the series finale. And though, like I said, I'm curious how you finish all of this off, I'm curious how you wrap up so many little threads at this point, but I'm still very excited for that finish. I know I keep saying it, but I'm kind of surprised at how much I ended up enjoying and liking and actually loving this show. I mean, I enjoyed the first 2 seasons well enough, but I've really grown to become a fan of it here in the 3rd season and to really surprisingly start to like Omega. I mean, to a lesser extent, she's like an Ahsoka to me in terms of how I feel about her or how my feelings about her have changed or evolved. She's a character that at first I just sort of rolled my eyes at and thought, well, she's the character here for the kids, for the younger audience, and I didn't really care about her either way. But she's become one that I like, and I am curious to see what they do indeed do with her next. Figuring, of course, they are going to do something, even if she is not in the next animated show. I think obviously she is going to survive the show. I think that is about 100% guarantee. But what I don't know, what is not guaranteed, is which of her brothers are going to survive the show, and what happens to them if they do survive. Where do they go next? Well, that's all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you thought of this episode of The Bad Batch. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you find it a bit short? And how excited are you, or aren't you, for the series finale next week? Do you think the show is ending too soon, or does this feel just right, or has it gone on too long? Whatever the case may be, leave those comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.